Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into a subreddit that I've only ever covered once before. It is r/TraumatizeThemBack. Make sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform, and if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. And I see some very tasty cookies in your near future. That is, if I don't get to them first. Okay, before we start this one, I need you all to do something. After I read the title for this first story, I want you to pause the video, the podcast, whichever platform you're on, and comment and let me know what you think that title is referring to. And then once we're done that story, you can let me know if you were wrong, because you will be. Alright, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Puzzle-Headed Girl 1300. Roommate said, he's a measurement kind of guy, so we measured. Background: I signed a lease with my friend and her boyfriend 6 months ago. My first time living alone, so I agreed to not having as much space, because I essentially had no use for it anyway. Think me having 6 small cabinets out of the 33 cabinets we have in the kitchen, and not having anything in the living, dining area, and no counter space. I agreed to this with the exchange of being allowed to use their pots and plates. This arrangement worked mostly until her pig boyfriend took up all the space in the freezer, leaving me almost no space. I reached out asking for a bit more space and I was left on scene for 2 days. So I did what everyone told me to do, move their stuff out of the way to make space. Of course, she messaged me right after saying, I'm like stuck in a middleman position once again. I know you said we can split top and bottom. Unfortunately, boyfriend's an exact measurement split kind of guy, so he's choosing to measure that out himself. Wanted to communicate my position so you could understand and not think I'm being indifferent to either of you. I told them, fine, if we want exact measurement, let's do that for everything. Your man-child can't just pick and choose. 3 days later, and plenty of volume calculations thanks to my friend, I went from having 6 to 13 cabinets out of the 33, and more fridge and freezer space. She was trying to make some cabinets into shared space, even though I had nothing stored in them, and won't in the future. So I made sure to question every single one and got more space. Only semi-con is, I have to buy my own pots and pans, but I was already planning on moving out, so it's not a big deal. What's even sweeter is catching her boyfriend trying to remeasure in the mid of the night through our security camera. I haven't gotten any text from her, so I guess he wasn't able to prove the numbers wrong. Now, my only worry is making sure he stays within his lane, but of course, I'm sure he can't complain because, well, numbers don't lie. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Spiritual Oil 7411. It says, F around and find out. You don't really even need that many pots and pans. Just a skillet, cookie sheet, and a saucepan is plenty for one person. Maybe a baking dish if you like casseroles or brownies. Check Goodwill for the baking dish, they always have a ton of glass ones. I feel like OP could have a lot more fun with this one because they could go out and get every free piece of kitchen junk they can find, whether it's on Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever, and then fill all of those cabinets and every inch of space they have with all of that extra kitchen junk. And then, when they move out, leave it all behind, because then it's not your problem, and they have to deal with it. Kind of an extra bit of revenge on top of what you already did. Now, for those of you who commented after the title, were you even close to what this story was about? I highly doubt it, but tell me the truth in the comments on YouTube or on Spotify. This story comes to us from Sean Be Gone. Why does she get to work from home and I can't? At my job, we're supposed to be in the office a couple of days a week. I am in almost every day as that's my preference, while others stick to their work from home days quite strictly, which is also fine. But I have one colleague who I work with closely that previously came into the office but now gets to work from home full time. And I'll add, she is great at her job and a joy to work with. Slowly, it was noticed by a few people she was never in the office, and they started making comments how it was strange, she was lucky, must have found a reason for an exemption, or has a special arrangement. They would look at me and wait for me to say something negative or complain, but I wouldn't say much. other than that she works from home due to personal reasons, as it's not my info to share with others. She is always available virtually if people need to meet or chat about a project. We were having a larger Teams meeting recently, and one of these nosy Nancys raised it in a passive-aggressive way, saying how she hasn't seen her in ages, and she's always at home, and it would be great to see her in the office sometime, as their team all have to be in a couple days a week. I sat there sipping my tea while my coworker dropped the bomb that her husband has been having seizures due to a rapidly growing brain tumor and he can't be left alone. She went on to add how she wishes she could get out of the house more often, but can't even leave for coffee or groceries unless one of the kids is home, or she can get a friend or family member to stop by, and that the other option was to go on leave, but felt it would be a burden to the team, and she can still get the work done from home. Let's just say the horrified looks people had and awkward silence has ensured that hasn't come up again since. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called FishyFishy5748. It says, people really need to learn to mind their own business. I hope your coworker and her family are doing better. OP responded and said, right? Unfortunately, they are not. It will eventually come to a point where she will have to go on leave, but she's told me she actually likes the distraction of work for the time being, as there's not much she can do for him most days, except just be around. Another commenter down below called Razol said, she is an amazing human. OP responded and said, she really is and never complains about anything, work or personal related. It honestly puts a lot of my daily issues into perspective. I make a point to message her every day at some point to just say hi and chat a bit, but I do struggle a bit with what I can do to support, as I know she'd never ask for anything. OP, I feel like she'd never mention it, but your coworker's probably pretty lonely, just staying at home and only dealing with the person who is dying. I'd maybe offer to bring them coffee or a meal or something so they don't have to do the work for it. You could even prepare it at their house if they'd let you, and give them a chance to talk to other people besides the person that they're taking care of. Being that caregiver is a very stressful position to be in, and that face-to-face interaction with somebody else might go a long way to make them feel better. Also, I hope the coworker that was making comments about her not being in the office got a serious reprimand from the boss. This story comes to us from, do you want broccoli? Yes, I can hear you. This happened when I was 18 or 19. I was at the gym and I decided to start with some stretching exercises, and soon after, 3 men in their 40s and 50s entered. As soon as I saw them, I turned off my headphones because the room we were in was pretty small, and I was afraid if they needed me to move, I wouldn't be able to hear them when they asked. It has happened before. To my surprise, they started snickering and making fun of me for doing warm-up exercises. They clearly thought I couldn't hear them, so I tried to ignore them and just move on. However, one of the men was fixated on bringing me up in their conversation. They were talking about their next vacation with their wives, and this dude kept saying stuff like, I bet this girl knows all about foreign men, or I bet this girl has tried a lot of exotic cuisine. This went on until one of the other men asked him to stop talking about me, but he just said, it's not like she can hear me. So I turn around and say, I can hear you. He went pale, mumbled a bit, said, what? So I just repeat, I can hear you. He looked embarrassed, and the other 2 men stared daggers at him. They tried to continue with their conversation, but it was a bit awkward, and they left soon after. Since then, I became even more anxious about using my headphones in public, but I admit it was kind of satisfying seeing him regret his comments. Also, for context, we were the only ones in that room, which was a separate area for exercises that don't need machines or weights, so I knew I was the only one they were talking about. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called CrowRoutine9631. It says, I like how you were super chill about it, didn't lose your cool or insult him, and you didn't have to for him to crumple internally. Well done. OP responded and said, thank you. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, but when the other men asked him to stop, I took my chance. Another commenter down below called FancyStatistician82 said, for the young people reading along, if this ever happens to you in the future, after calmly doing what OP did, finish that exercise. Leave the room, go to the front desk, Tell the staff that the 3 men in the warm-up room wearing gray, green, and black shirts were making comments about you. Yes, you can positively identify them. Yes, you are willing to write down the quotes. If you can't do it for your own sake, do it for the sake of the next several dozen young women who may not be as collected and self-assured. OP responded and said, "In my case, I was debating whether to report it or not, but I ultimately couldn't trust this gym's management. I once caught a worker giving my private information to a man who wanted to know what kind of sport I did, which is insane because I could have easily answered that question. No need to read my file. I left soon after. I was just waiting for the period I pay for to end." Holy crap, OP, never go back to that gym ever again. Giving out a patron's personal information to another patron? Oh my gosh, they could get closed down for that. I do love how you dealt with the situation calmly. You would have been justified in snapping right back at them, but you kept your cool, and that's pretty neat. This story comes to us from Southern Donut 2495. Always yell back. This particular time, I was sitting at the back of a cab, and I was coming back home after a long day. The cab driver dude was a little odd because he was twitching and getting irritated with other drivers and me. I think that should have been the first red flag, but I didn't notice it because I was really tired. Anyways, thankfully I reached home safely and I looked at the meter to pay, but this dude barked at me and told me I needed to pay 2 times the amount written on the meter just because he said so. Of course, I said no, because he can't change the rules like that, and he started yelling at me with tons of insults and threatened me to pay that amount. Thankfully again, I got dropped near a crowded street, so I was relatively safe. Usually, I would have let it go, but this time, I got really mad. So I screamed back at the top of my lungs and told him to talk to me properly, and I think in the heat of the moment, I also ended up telling him he has no manners for shouting and overcharging me, that he should be ashamed of himself, and asked him what his family would say if they saw him behaving like this, at the top of my lungs. Bro was so taken aback by that his anger was replaced by confusion. By that point, I realized his eyes were bloodshot. Now that I think about it, he must have been drunk or on something, so I promptly paid him the amount on the meter and left. He tried to shout at me again and threaten me, and I screamed back telling him to shut up or I'll report him to the police if he keeps this up. For a second, I thought he sobered up a bit because he ran with his tail between his legs. Needless to say, he won't be trying that with other people. It pains me to think of how many times this has probably worked for this driver in the past, scaring people into paying more because this driver now knows where you live. You literally told them your address when you got in and now they're at the front door of your house, and that's a very good scare tactic. OP, good for you for not giving in and just giving it right back to the driver. This story comes to us from SockTall8315. My classmate made a low blow, so I got on his level. This story is from when I was in 8th grade. At the time, I was going through some stuff and was depressed, so I was pretty insecure. A sticking point for me was my skin because it had been pretty bad that year, and since it was my face, everyone could see. I was also pretty non-confrontational because I have anxiety and was pretty shy at the time. One day, me and some other students were waiting for our bus to arrive, and we were all talking when this one boy says out of nowhere, "Hey, want me to pick up some Proactive for you?" For those who don't know, it's a skincare brand. I wasn't even remotely close to him, and I had never said anything like that to him, so he had no reason to say that. This boy was also not thin. He was a chunky kid, and I have no clue how he felt about that, but it was the first thing you'd notice besides his seemingly everlasting buzz cut. So I hit back with, "Sure, want me to get you some Slim Fast?" I don't think I need to explain what that is. He was kinda stupid though, so he was confused until we got to our after-school program where he asked a staff member what it was. I still think about the devastated look he had when he heard what Slim Fast is. Would I say that now? Maybe not, but I think my 14-year-old self was funny for that one. I'm also a little proud of my younger self for getting back at him, because it was hard for me to do that at that age. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Little Whisper Hannah. It says, "That moment when you realize their insult just made you step up your game. Revenge complete." OP, I love how you threw it right back at this person who probably hasn't had very many people actually throw something back in their face ever. Sadly, for somebody to make that kind of comment to you in the first place, your response to them isn't going to make the situation any better, and it's probably not going to make them think twice about saying those comments to other people as well. They are just what we like to call a butthole. This story comes to us from Ruffian. Another post reminded me of my blind friend's story about getting her eyes examined. A friend of mine is blind, like both eyes removed as a toddler with no memory of vision blind. She has prosthetic eyes for both appearance and maintaining the sockets. Not exactly sure what that means, but apparently it can cause problems not having orbs in the orbital sockets. She told me the story of how once she went into her eye doctor, obviously to check on her sockets and other anatomy, not eyes, and the new to her assistant that checked her in asked her to do a routine vision check. I'm completely blind, she told the assistant. Oh, we know, but just so we can get a proper exam of your eyes, we need a record of your vision. My friend kept insisting she was so very, very blind. The assistant kept insisting they needed the exam to check on her eyes. Finally, fed up, my friend popped out one of her prosthetic eyes and held it out to the assistant and said, "Here, now you can examine it all you want." The doc was apparently apologetic. I asked why her guide dog wasn't a giveaway she hadn't brought her, as it was just easier to have her husband take her. I don't know how her needing the assistant to guide her to the room wasn't a hint, but well, I guess she figured it out eventually. Jumping down to the comments on this one, there's one from a user called Anchovy Hopkins. It says, "Laughing my butt off. The assistant should have looked at her chart, but also she could have just said, 'These are prosthetic eyes.' Plenty of completely blind people have intact eyes that need examination." OP responded and said, "Yeah, my friend was just taken aback. She'd been having exams like this for decades at this point and never had anyone ask for a vision test. She's also a bit timid with new people, so she probably was a bit flummoxed herself." Okay, I am agreeing with the one commenter here. Yes, the person behind the counter should have looked at OP's chart. But OP didn't need to respond and say, "I'm blind." They could have just said, "I have prosthetic eyes," and that would have been the end of that. If this person behind the counter was brand new at their assistant job, then they might have been having a difficult time that day and just missed it on the chart. It happens. We can't always assume the worst. If you enjoyed daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.